Armenia. A truly amazing country with a rich history, culture and magnificent nature. In this video we will go on a 5-day journey through Armenia and will try, at least in part, to understand the intricacies of the mysterious Armenian soul. We will start our adventure with the picturesque city of Yerevan, an ancient capital with a 1000-year history. We will climb the cascade, we will drop into the famous Yerevan Tavern, we'll try the traditional Armenian meals and learn the secrets of the local cuisine. We will go to Apaga Resort, where peering at the mountain peaks, we will try to find the way to ourselves. We'll fly the zipline, go along the mountain path to the Lastiver waterfall. We will stop by the ancient Sevanavank monastery complex, and also will visit the village of Tsaghkunk, a real treasure of Armenian countryside, and dine restaurant run by one of Armenia's best chefs. I will tell you how and where we exchange money, how we use mobile internet, how we booked a transfer and accommodations. I will tell you if Mir cards work in Armenia and much more. Grab yourself a large cup of tea with something tasty and have a nice trip. So, like any journey, this one starts with a road to the airport. We had to get up very early, around 5 AM, but it paid off with a gorgeous sunrise and a road with no traffic jams. Here we are at Moscow Sheremetyevo Airport. Everything was easy and fast here, including the check-in and all the security checks. Then we went to the duty-free zone, and yes, it was closed for some time, but now it's fine. We had a lot of free time left, which we spent as best as we could. For example, like this. And here comes the same run-through, but 2 years earlier. Write in the comments which one you find more artistic. We sniffed different liquors, which I must say is quite amusing. The aromas of famous drinks are collected from natural materials. For example, the smell of smoke for peated whiskey is created by a real charred wood. Finally, we sat ourselves in a cafe, had some beer and sausages, and then up we go. The flight lasted for about 3.5 hours. It was a morning flight, so we were fed breakfast. Ticket cost per person in May 2024 was around $273 for a round trip. The plane itself was small. As far as I remember, it was 737 operated by Aeroflot. There were no problems during the flight. Decent service, decent food. And on the very approach to Zvartnots Airport, we had a beautiful view of a part of Mount Ararat. I tried my best to capture the peak in the camera, but it was not easy. I hope I managed to convey at least the general impression. Trust me, it was very beautiful. Here we are in Armenia, going to Yerevan by Yandex taxi service. And while on the way to hotel, here's a brief background on this country. Armenia is one of the oldest states in the world, with history going back thousands of years. In the 9th century BC, the state of Urartu existed on the territory of modern Armenia. By the 1st century BC, the Armenian kingdom was formed under the rule of Tigran the Great, covering the vast territories in the region. The Armenian Apostolic Church predominating in Armenia is one of the oldest Christian churches in the world and the first Christian church adopted at the state level. In 301 AD, Armenia became the first country in the world to officially adopt Christianity as a state religion, which played a key role in the formation of its culture and identity. The Apostolic Church is not only a religious institution, but also an important cultural and national symbol. We'll visit some of these cultural symbols on this journey. In the Middle Ages, Armenia was at the crossroads of trade routes, subjected to raids and conquests by various empires: Persian, Roman, Byzantine, and later by Ottoman and Russian empires. For Armenia, the 20th century was a time of great trials. Armenia briefly gained independence and then became part of the Soviet Union. In 1991, after the collapse of the USSR, Armenia again became an independent republic. Today it is a country with a unique culture, ancient traditions, and rich historical heritage that continues to attract travelers from all over the world. Here we are, already at our Orion Apart hotel. It was not easy to find it on the grounds, as it's located deep in the courtyards of the other buildings and is almost invisible from the main street. Having stopped trying to find it by taxi, we got out and went on foot. My innate sense of direction quickly led us to the hotel. The hotel consists of two sections. The lower floors are reserved for the hostel, the second and higher floors, where we stayed, are apartments. Everyone at the reception speaks decent Russian, so there will be no problems with checking in. Our breakfast was included. I will show it later. Breakfasts in Armenia are really something. The hotel is quite new, nothing to complain about. Everything's fresh, everything works fine and looks very premium. And all this is right in the center of Yerevan. For a better understanding, here's a picture. If the center of Yerevan is considered to be Republic Square, then it was a 10-minute walk for us. We had 2 rooms, 1 toilet and a kitchen, which we did not use because the next morning we were to leave for Apaga Resort. We booked all this through booking.com with payment upon check-in. This luxury cost us 68 USD per night, which in our case means 23 USD per person. While we've been waiting to check in, we quickly found an exchange office literally around the corner and went to change rubles for drums. It's better to do this in Yerevan, not at the airport, where exchange rate is mildly put unfavorable. Since we only had half a day in Yerevan, we quickly unpacked and went for a walk around Yerevan lightly. First of all, we dropped by Republic Square. It should be noted that in May 2024, there was a public unrest in Armenia. People gathered in this square and expressed dissatisfaction with the current situation in the country. We found the square like this. There were only a few people there, maybe because it was Friday, a working day. Everything was quiet, peaceful, without riots and other excesses. Then we moved to Northern Avenue. This is a kind of Moscow's Arbat, a walking street with very beautiful buildings and its own sort of capital vibe. There are many representatives of progressive youth here, many cafes and boutiques. There is even an underground shopping center. Here I am standing in line for coffee with these progressive youngsters. My face is like this because there are some young guys walking behind me with Armenian flag, shouting slogans. One is riding a scooter and filming others on smartphone. But here political upheavals of the street come to an end. We walk to the end of the street, take a couple of photos, and move on to the main landmark of Yerevan, the Cascade. Cascade. This architectural and monumental complex is actually a cascade of 5 open terraces. The cascade connects the northern and central parts of the city. The complex has exhibition halls, fountains, flower beds and sculptures. Above the complex, there's a monument to the 50th anniversary of October Revolution. In front of the complex, there's a monument to Alexander Tamanyan, the architect who designed the cascade. The construction of the cascade began in 1971 and was partially completed in 1980. The cascade is a set of 556 steps sloping at 15 degrees. The length from the base to the top is 302 meters and from the base to the upper platform 450 meters. The upper part of the cascade remains unfinished. However, the good news is the project for the completion of construction has already been developed. I must say the climb is quite difficult, especially if it takes place under the blistering sun. No chance not to break a sweat. However, there is one walk around which I will tell you about later. We've been climbing for a long time with several stops and took a lot of pictures. The charm of this place is that the higher you go, the more breathtaking the view of the city and Ararat becomes. The traditional Armenian name for this is Masis. Ararat consists of two volcanoes merged together, Greater Ararat and Lesser Ararat, and is located in Turkey, but is still a national symbol of Armenia and is considered a sacred mountain. Ararat is depicted on the coat of arms of Armenia. Historians have described an interesting case when the Turkish government protested to Moscow over the appearance of Mount Ararat on the coat of arms of the Armenian Soviet Republic. According to legend, either one of Soviet authorities or Joseph Stalin himself replied, "Your coat of arms depicts a crescent moon, but do you actually own one?" On a good day, you can see both peaks. As the locals say, Ararat doesn't open itself to anyone. On my first trip, I was luckier and saw both peaks. On this trip, a cap of clouds covered the highest peak. And this is how it should look in ideal conditions.
Also, on my first trip, there were a lot of IT youngsters here. There were almost no Armenian faces around. In 2024, the situation leveled out and settled down. I even thought for a second how great it would be to sit on these steps with a laptop and lo-fi in headphones. What awesome code could be written with such a stunning view in such a creative environment? Dreams. But I'm getting distracted. Let's move on. Quite out of breath, we finally climbed to the highest observation deck. And this is when we realized that it was all worth it. The view from this deck is astounding. See for yourself. Time to go down. Oh yeah, I nearly forgot. Here it is, a detour for the lazy ones. There is an escalator gallery on the side. It is also, in a way, an art gallery. While we were going down, I managed to take a few photos of the current exhibition. The sun was already setting, and the stomach was clearly hinting that it was time to have a snack. This time we did not take any chances with the new place, but went to the traditional Armenian restaurant, Yerevan Tavern, which we already knew from our previous trip. A wonderful, authentic place. The service is 10 out of 10. You should have seen the nobility the waiters carry themselves with. Pride and grace in their every movement and manner of speaking. They do not just serve food, they create a mood. Here, by the way, they make their own bread using a traditional method, which is included in the UNESCO World Intangible Heritage List. Sitting at a table, you can watch this process and, as it were, slightly touch the national heritage of the Armenian people. We ate heartily and had to pay. But here, an unexpected pleasant surprise awaited us. In general, Armenians like to surprise, in a good way. We thought about paying with a Union Pay card, but lo and behold, a terminal with Mir Pay support appeared from under the table, and I even managed to pay with my smartphone. Armenians are truly inventive people. I don't really want to know how they even managed to get this payment terminal through their cash register. I was just pleased that we could save some cash, because we would need it further in the mountains where there is no Wi-Fi, not anything, and no bank cards accepted. After a hearty dinner, we just had to take a walk and went to sit on the steps of the Matenadaran Museum. This word means a repository of manuscripts. The Matenadaran, named after Mesrop Mashtots, is a research institute and museum with a unique collection of manuscripts. The construction of a special building for the Matenadaran can be considered an extremely important event for the preservation of Armenian culture, especially the rich manuscript heritage. The construction of current museum building of the Matenadaran was carried out in 1945-1959. 20,000 manuscripts collected in the Matenadaran represent almost all areas of knowledge in ancient and medieval Armenia: history, geography, grammar, philosophy, law, medicine, mathematics, cosmology, calendar studies, esotericism, translated and national literature, miniatures, music and theater. In 1997, the Matenadaran was included into UNESCO World Heritage List and is considered one of the most important places for the preservation and development of Armenian national memory. Alright, I promise not to burden you with the brief historical references anymore. That's where the first day came to an end. Being quite tired after the flight and all the strolls, we went home. Of course, one day is far not enough to fully discover Yerevan. There are many cultural heritage sites that need to be visited to get to know better and to feel the heart of Armenia. I leave this difficult task to you, my dear viewer. I just slightly opened the door for you, but whether to enter it or not is up to you to decide. As it goes, a good trip begins with a good breakfast, and our breakfast was just right. Let me remind you that breakfast for 3 persons was included in the price. Let's take a quick look at the scale of trip we've got today. We have 145 kilometers of road ahead of us, which can be covered in about 3 hours. We start from our hotel and move here to Apaga Resort. On the way, we will stop by Sevanavank monastery. In total, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we should reach Apaga Resort. Here, we will spend the next 2 days. It is worth explaining how we will move about. The cheapest way is either using your own car or renting one. But we've got a good friend, Ramjan, who always helps us with transfers on our trips. He recommended us his friend, a driver with a brand new Hyundai Solaris. We will use it to travel from Yerevan to Apaga, and from there to the village of Tsaghkunk, and from there to the airport. For all 3 transfers we paid 84,000 drams, which is $215 or 72 USD per person. Yes, it would have probably been cheaper to rent a car, but we didn't want to bother with it this time. After all, the main goal of this trip was to slow down and relax, and not to sit behind the wheel for 3 high-tension hours. We'll be driving almost constantly uphill. Yerevan is located somewhere at an altitude of 1 kilometer above sea level. First we will climb a good kilometer to the Sevanavank monastery, then we'll sharply descend and again climb to an altitude of 1,350 meters to the Apaga Resort. On our way we encountered all kinds of bad weather. We started in the rain, then caught some sun and walked around Sevanavank in strong wind. It must be said that there is always a strong wind in Sevan. And on our last trip 2 years earlier it was quite the same. So what is so remarkable about this monastery and why should you stop by here? Firstly, it is located on the beautiful high mountain lake Sevan. The views of this lake alone are mesmerizing. They fascinated not only us, tourists. At the end of the 8th century, several monks settled on the island of Sevan, who built their cells and the chapel here. A wall encircled the island, and the watchtower with a gate was built above it. Then the monks built 3 churches, cells, and outbuildings. The monastery was founded in 874 by Princess Mariam, the daughter of King Ashot I. The king of Armenia, Ashot II the Iron, lived in the monastery for some time. Near the walls of the monastery, he gave a battle to the Arab warriors who approached the shores of Sevan. The monks of Sevanavank also participated in the Battle of Sevan. In the 16th-17th centuries, the walls of the monastery were destroyed, and in 1930 the last monk left the island. Today, the monastery is functional again and houses the theological seminary named after Vazgen I. During the Soviet era, the lake became shallow, and now it is no longer an island, but a peninsula, and it's easy to get there. Sevanavank consists of 2 churches, Surb Arakelots and Surb Astvatatsin. They are built of black tuff, which gives them severity and monumentality. The architecture combines simplicity of forms and deep symbolism intrinsic to the ancient Armenian architecture. You will often come across stones like this in Armenia. They are called khachkars, unique stone stelae with carved crosses. These works of art serve not only as religious symbols, but also as historical monuments that tell about the life and faith of the Armenian people. In Sevanavank, khachkars are found both near churches and on the surrounding hills. Most of them date back to the 9th-17th centuries. Each khachkar is unique. The craftsmen decorated them with intricate ornaments, images of cross, grape vines, the sun, and other symbols. These details are not only aesthetically impressive, but also have a deep spiritual meaning, symbolizing the victory of life over death and the connection of man with God. Khachkars are often considered a source of divine grace, a place to pray and ask for healing, consolation, or spiritual strengthening. For believers, visiting khachkars, especially in holy places like Sevanavank, can be associated with spiritual purification and finding inner peace. It is for this inner peace that I go to Armenia. I have been to many places, but only here, high in the mountains, do I truly feel that I find that very peace of mind. No, I did not sit for hours in front of the khachkars. It was enough for me to see them, walk around, sit on the edge of the cliff, peering into the horizon. Closer to the base of the monastery, there are many kiosks with all kinds of souvenirs, hot coffee and snacks, and many dogs are running around. Our dear Olenka found several dozen ticks on them and selflessly rushed to save these dogs. Later, we had to save her from these ticks. That's about it. We grab some coffee with gata pie, take a few shots near Lake Sevan, and moving on. We drive along the lake and then turn left and go into the tunnel. This tunnel is worth telling about separately. It's very lengthy, almost 1 kilometer long, but this is not the most amazing thing. The climate before and after the mountain is very different. In the Sevan region, it is more like a dry steppe. Few trees, many tough small bushes, and rusty mountain slopes. On the other side of the tunnel, the climate and landscape are somewhat reminiscent of Rivendell, the land of Elrond from Lord of the Rings. There is bright, lush greenery, many trees, and noticeably higher humidity. I felt a quite sharp transition from one climate to another when I drove through this tunnel in the fall. No kidding, I came from autumn to a fragrant summer. But as they say, it's easier to show once. Look. All the slopes are covered with trees, not a single hit of the steppe. The beauty is insane, and so is the Serpentine Road. What is the saying? What Russian does not like the fast driving? Wait till you see the Armenians behind the wheel. In a couple of places, our dear Olenka was pressed into the seat as we drove along the edges of very high precipices, the depth of which is unfathomable, because the bottom is hidden by fog. After the town of Yerevan, the road goes up a serpentine. We make a quick stop in the middle of our ascent and take the bird's eye view shot of Yerevan town. Moving on. I want to note that compared to the last time, when our car barely climbed up the liquid clay, this time everything has already been fixed and improved. The road is now paved with asphalt coating right up to the resort, and it's wonderful. We make the last turn, and here it is, the beauty of Apaga Resort. checking in at the reception and getting our keys. None of our bank cards work here. We paid in cash, which we got exchanged in advance in Yerevan. There's one room for 3 guests with breakfast, and it cost us 148 USD for 2 nights, or 49 USD per person. The houses go uphill in rows. Ours was in the very top row. Going up there with our bags was quite difficult. The thin air makes itself felt. The rooms themselves are very simple. You will not find any frills here. This place is not about that. Rough stone walls without finishing, 3 beds, a wardrobe, a table, several chairs and a stove. We never lit the stove though. It is more decorative here, since there is a heating from boiler. Yes, let's be honest, the conditions are semi-Spartan, ascetic, which is quite in the spirit of Armenians. But despite all this, it is nice and cozy here in its own way. I came here for this almost homely simplicity and peace, to slow down properly in the silence of the mountains. We left our stuff in the room and went to explore the territory. For me, this was already the second time in this place. The first time we were unlucky with the weather and we lived the whole time inside a rain cloud. Literally, you couldn't see anything around, and the views here are breathtaking. Putting our friend on a horse and going to look at the mountains.
Они дрессированы?
The horseback ride took about an hour and was not the easiest, I must say. Definitely not for the beginners. There were elevation changes and slippery slopes and a disobedient horse, Ola. Yes, Ola was riding Ola, but she didn't find out about it right away. The main guide shouted at Ola several times with a thick Armenian accent, "Ola, Ola, where are you going?" And our dear Olenka thought that he was shouting at her. Much later she learned that these were commands to the horse. We still had a half day to ourselves left, and we decided to spend it on a hike to the Lastiver waterfall. The path leading there is mountainous and very dangerous in some places. There will be no guide with you, and no one will explain where to turn at the forks. Here and there you will see old slippers with inscriptions that act as signs. And that's it. But don't worry, I'll show you everything now, and when you come here, you'll be prepared for everything. First of all, don't even think about going here after the rain. Slippery narrow paths and stones and the complete lack of fences on the way to the waterfall can play a terrible last joke on you. Something like that happened to us on our first visit. We walked just a bit up to this path. We weren't wearing hiking gear at all. City shoes without a protector don't hold up at all on such a path. There was nothing on this path to grab onto and ensure yourself from sliding down. And down in the clouds somewhere there was a bottom about 100 meters down probably. In short, we didn't even try our luck because we only have one life, so we went back. But this time the situation was much better. It was more or less dry and light, and we already knew what to prepare for. In short, the trail goes down a little at first, then up for a long time, and down even longer to the waterfall. We walked one way for about 2 hours. Back it was much faster and easier. On our way we even met families with children who were already coming back. At the highest point of the trail you will come onto a rocky plateau with a stunning view of all the surrounding mountains. But be very careful, the plateau has an unsettling angle towards the slope and ends in a steep cliff. You can see a smile in my face, but taking these photos was quite unnerving. Then there was a long and fairly safe descent. The
closer to the waterfall, the louder the sound of the mountain river became. You can get to the river itself through a funnel in the rock like this. I even climbed into it following other tourists, but just in time my companions found a sign to a quieter path on the right. This path will lead you to this sign. This is a paid camp where you can stay in one of these houses for the night for 8,000 drams. From here, you can return to Yerevan by a 4x4, bypassing all these adventures for 15,000 drams. But this is not the waterfall itself. We went in, paid 1,000 drams per person, and were given delicious forest tea to drink. The staff here is very welcoming, and there is a special atmosphere. A churning mountain river, benches, a samovar, and high humidity. Here, we finally felt that we have reached the very bottom of the gorge along which we had been walking for so long. Having caught our breath, we moved on. A little life hack. If you don't want to pay, then just go to the right at this sign and you will reach the waterfall passing this place. Well, here it is, the beautiful Lastiver waterfall itself. Yes, this is not Indonesia, not Bali with its 10 meters high waterfalls, but it is also breathtaking. Huge roaring masses of water squeeze between the stones in a narrow gorge. It is definitely worth visiting this place once. We take a couple of photos and go back. It is already starting to get dark. For dinner, despite the terrible cold, we decided to go outside to enjoy the view of the mountains and clouds that lay in this gorge. Just imagine it. You can have dinner here above the clouds. Priceless. By the way, this video has a small teaser of the next day's adventures. It was a very eventful day, so immediately after dinner we went to bed. The morning in Apaga was gorgeous. Not a single cloud, a beautiful view of the surrounding area and silence. And again, a kitty. When I say not a single cloud, I compare it to my previous time 2 years ago, when literally everything was covered in clouds and it was raining. It was terribly damp and chilly. But this time everything was wonderful. The weather held out just long enough for us to eat, fly the zipline, and have time to admire the beauty of the surrounding mountains. I am showing you this place for a reason. There is a plane fuselage attached to the edge of the cliff, and this is the future receiving station of the new giant zipline. The largest one in Apaga, if not in all Armenia. The locals said that it will descend from the very top of the mountain and the cable will have to be pulled there by helicopter. A light breakfast on the terrace of the new restaurant, and we set off to the assembly point for the zipline. About this fast. It should be noted that the new restaurant is much more substantial and comfortable than the previous one, where we dined in 2022. A lot of progress is visible after 2 years.
We followed the signs to the ticket office of Yale Extreme Park and put on our zipline gear. The zipline consists of 5 lines, but there is a nuance. Not all lines are accessible to people weighing over 100 kilos. Thank God I am within the gap between the lower and the upper limits and flew them all. The lower limits is about 70 kilograms, I guess. I will show you all 5 lines one by one. This is the first one. For me and Oля, this was the first time, so it was scary to go first. So our most experienced zipliner went ahead. The passages between the lines can be quite difficult, but everything is well designed, so you walk less and fly more. Well, and admire the beauty of the mountain valley. At some rest stops there are water stations. You can also take a drone shot of your flights, so you're getting the full service. This is the second line. People heavier than 100 kilos can only fly in the lines number 1, 2 and 5. Only lighter fellas can fly lines number 3 and 4. At the end of the second line, there is an observation deck with a stunning view of the gorge. The first and second lines are a light warm-up and preparation for the third line, the fastest and longest. And here it is. Somewhere at the halfway, when you're rushing at full speed over the treetops, the trees below you disappear all of a sudden, and a deep canyon appears instead. The very moment of this change in the landscape makes you cling to a gear with fear, but then you realize that if you fall from such a height, there will be nothing to pick up and you let go of the situation. You begin to admire the surrounding valley and the vast space around you. Somewhere in the middle of the way, my towing block stopped coping with the speed and began to rattle and jump on the rope. Once again, I thought that it's time to find a fluffy pine tree below to land on. Having reached the end, I barely stopped. When they unhooked me, I've been shaking fiercely with adrenaline. Now it's clear why heavier people are not allowed here. They will either catch the pine tree at the beginning or will not break at the end. Of all the 5 lines, this one is the craziest. On the 4th line, I was no longer afraid of anything and reached the end with confidence. Then there was a long climb up with stops and a viewing platform with a water station. And finally, the last 5th zip line. Here I met my companions again, and we went back to the place where we started at the very beginning. Here we are, chilling on the mountainside without any gear and sharing our impressions. The adventure itself is quite feasible for everyone. I did something like this for the first time and did well. I really liked it. Speed, adrenaline, the feeling of flying and the feeling of freedom. It was wonderful. By the way, I still have the yellow branded gloves from the Yale Extreme Park at home as a keepsake. Yale Extreme Park itself is much more than just a zip line. There are also horseback riding, a group ride on a huge truck to the mountains, a rope park, a via ferrata which our most experienced zipliner walked through. In general, it will definitely not be boring. After such powerful impressions, we all felt sleepy, and the weather got worse again. When we woke up, we realized that we were hungry and went to a restaurant. After the fresh air activities, the hunger was ravenous. As we understood, we slept through the rain and came out just in time to photograph a rainbow over the mountain valley. The sight was incredible, as if nature itself was trying hard to please, especially for us. This time we decided to sit inside. The entire restaurant was at our service, since after Sunday afternoon, all the resort guests had gone home. We clearly overdid it with the number of dishes, but everything was so delicious that we ate everything without difficulty. All this time, the picture outside the window was incredibly beautiful. The sun rays kept sliding along the slopes of the valley, illuminating one village, then another. After such a hearty dinner, we simply had to take a walk, in complete silence and without any people at all. All the guests went home, so we were the only group left on the territory of the complex, and we could not help but to take advantage of this. We walked along paths, sat on observation platforms, went far into the mountains and spent a long time gazing at the breathtaking expanses, mountain tops, valleys, and tiny villages from a height where clouds live. The morning of our last day in Apaga was very misty. As I said earlier, the weather here is unpredictable. You can come for 2 days and not see anything, or the opposite. We were not discouraged, a personal breakfast in the restaurant was waiting for us. But knowing where we would go next, we did not eat much. Having said goodbye to the friendly dogs and loaded into the car, we began the descent from the mountains. The lower we went, the better the visibility became. A couple of times we had to let a herd of cows pass and sleep under the bucket of an excavator, and we descended to Yerevan. There was no fog here. After the village of Tsaghkunk, we turned right and began the ascent to the Haghartsin monastery. Here, a pleasant surprise awaited for us. The whole way uphill we drove in the clouds, but there were no clouds above the monastery itself, which allowed me to picture it in all its glory. Haghartsin Monastery is one of the most beautiful and famous monastic complexes in Armenia, located near the town of Dilijan, in a picturesque gorge surrounded by dense oak and beech forest of the Dilijan Reserve. The monastery was built in 11th-13th centuries, and it is one of the monasteries in Armenia that was destroyed and devastated during the invasions of the Seljuk Turks in the second half of the 11th century. Starting from the second half of the 12th century, the restoration of the country and, first of all, the monasteries began. Many original buildings have survived and been restored to this day. The main monastery church of Surp Astvatsatin, Holy Mother of God, with a very interesting 16-sided dome. Church of St. Gregory, Church of St. Stephen, a miniature copy of the main Church of St. Gregory, burial vaults of the royal family of Bagratuni, and the refectorium. There are several khachkars on the territory. Gravestones of the monks who lived here are built into the floor. Unlike Orthodox, in Armenian culture, walking on such gravestones inside a church is not deemed disrespectful. This is explained by the fact that people buried in such places considered it an honor for believers to walk on their graves when entering the church with prayer. Surely you shouldn't deliberately step on the gravestones, trample on them, especially in dirty shoes. If a gravestone can be walked around, it's better to do so. This monastery is an ideal place for those who seek spiritual solitude, enjoyment of nature, and are interested in the history and architecture of Armenia. We were lucky with the weather this time too. It was raining as we were driving up, and it was raining again as we were leaving. This is why we were able to walk around the deserted monastery during the only short period of time when the weather was good. Incredible luck! Until 2013, one of the landmarks of the monastery was this oak tree with a hollow. It was believed that if you crawl through the hollow, all your wishes will come true. In 2013, this 1000-year oak burned down. But the hole is still there. Of course, I crawled through it and made a wish. Let's see if it comes true. A park and a bakery were set up next to the monastery. They bake matnakash here, a kind of traditional flatbreads, and many people come here specifically for them, and they say that such delicious ones are baked only in the monastery. I was deeply struck by this place. First of all, by how simple and without frills everything is arranged here. Apostolic churches are much more ascetic and down-to-earth, in my opinion, compared to Orthodox ones. The monks here are focused on serving God, forgetting about the mundane comfort and the benefits of the civilization. This architecture can be seen in all the Armenian churches that I have visited. This place is definitely worth visiting for those who seek peace and tranquility, for those who want to discover their spirituality at a new level. Let's say I'm not the most religious person, but even I managed to feel something true, something real here. Whether these severe stone arcs or the beauty of the surrounding nature influenced it, I do not know. But I know for sure that I want to come back here at least once more. The rain began to pour exactly at the moment when we were about to leave here. And it poured right up to the very tunnel that separates the two climate zones. Of course, beyond the tunnel there was no more rain and the view was completely different. But enjoying the views on an empty stomach is a lousy pastime, so we made a stop on the shore of Lake Sevan in Samo's restaurant. Samo's is a fish restaurant where you can try meals made from local fish, especially whitefish and trout. This is probably the most popular restaurant of all those located on the shores of Sevan. In high season, you won't find a free seat here, you need to book a table in advance. I was here twice, in October and May, and both times the food was very tasty. Let me say it, this is not a Michelin cuisine, this is home cooking, and therefore the appearance of the dishes and the presentation are simple, but the taste is amazing, and the panoramic view of the lake and the mountains is simply gorgeous. For example, here are potatoes made the way my granny cooked it when I was a kid. We called it wheel potatoes. But don't be fooled by the simplicity of this place. It is also incredibly high-tech. I present you the world's first contactless hygienic anti-COVID toilet, where both flushing and cleaning are done with a wave of the hand. We ate our fill, took a couple of photos by the lake and went on. The weather had totally improved and we were racing to Tsaghkunk at full speed. But on the way we were stopped by road police. There is a tricky turn at the exit from the highway, which many people drive through incorrectly and get ticketed. But our driver did not fall for the trick and drove through it correctly. After a short conversation with the police, we drove on. Here we are passing the villages of Varser and Geghard. We drive past the memorial park to the heroes of the Second World War and enter Tsaghkunk. Tsaghkunk chef house and its owner Yerevan Cascade have been familiar to me since my first trip. I spent a lot of time here on my first visit to Armenia and fell in love with this place with all my heart. As to dear guests, we were given the best rooms with a stunning view of the village and the valley of the Razdan river. We ran down and yes, there it is. That same creaky sap is still there. It's good when something doesn't change. And a lot has changed in 2 years. This is what the chef's house looked like 2 years ago. No extension, no finishing, and this is how it looks like now. The exterior finishing is done and an entire restaurant has been added to the house instead of the old canopy. Also, on the territory where the neighbor's cow used to drop in from time to time, there is a bakery now. Shortly, in 2 years almost all has changed for the better. Why almost I'll tell you later. To move on, I need to explain why Tsaghkunk, why this particular hotel in the middle of nowhere have become my second home. It's all about the owner of this hotel, Yerevan Cascade. This man really deserves a separate video, but I will try to run through the most important moments of his biography. So, Yerevan has been in the restaurant business since childhood. One of the top chefs in Armenia, citizen of the world, and one of the few who is developing gastrotourism in Armenia. He cooked for top government officials and high-ranking guests, such as Russian ex-First Lady Nancy Pelosi, an American member of the House of Representatives, and for other guests of no lower rank. He studied abroad and worked in restaurants from Denmark to Cyprus. But after 16 years, he returned to his native Tsaghkunk village to develop rural tourism. He applied for the development of Armenian rural tourism and negotiated with more than 300 people until he found investors. Can you imagine the level of dedication this person has?
Thanks to Yura, a previously unknown village has now a top restaurant and a guest house. With the help of the grant, Yura completed the construction and developed the territory. Yura's entire family was involved in the construction. People come here in Maybachs and Teslas, carefully driving around the cow patties just to see this legendary place or to celebrate some event here. And with the all incredible merits, he's a very simple and open person, and I am happy to know him. He himself goes to the mountains to pick flowers and makes such cute little bags with the herbal infusions. Of course, I brought a whole bag of such little bags home. When we came here for the first time, he and his wife waited for our arrival way past midnight, sitting by this fireplace. Can you imagine that? Considering that the hotel has staff and he could have asked them. But no, he ushered us to the room himself and showed us everything. He even allowed us to use the restaurant kitchen to cook food. And I can't count how many times he made dinner at his restaurant free for us. Simply put, he is a great man. Yura also had a second house here, this one. We stayed there and had dinner several times too. The house is gorgeous. The view from the terrace onto the valley simply leaves you out of words. In the basement of this house there was, and probably still is, a winery. Our dear friend David Jan gave us a wonderful tour of it. We almost got to the placement of new grapes that time. Otherwise we could have taken part in this exciting process. Now in 2024 this house no longer belongs to Yura for some reason unknown to me. It's a pity. It was very tasty and cozy here, and in the winter they cooked hash in the basement. I hope now you see better why I and many others are attracted to this place. Where else will you see people who will invest so much in a village? The most unassuming one, and at first glance unremarkable. Where they drive sheep and cows in the mornings and evenings, where geese walk along the streets, but where at the same time there are chic traditional restaurants with delicious cuisine and simple human warmth and sincerity. That very real, humane sincerity. It is a pity that this time we only had less than 2 days here. We wanted to have a chance to show our friend as much as possible, and therefore, immediately after arriving we went to the mountains. Tsaghkunk translated from Armenian means blossoming. During the flowering period, all the mountain slopes are strewn with flowers. Well, they should have been strewn, but for some reason this time they were not. We probably missed this blossoming moment a little. The village is located at an altitude of almost 2000 meters. The Geghard mountains around are quite old and flat, and it seems to be easy to just walk there, especially since there is a road. But this isn't so at all. Firstly, you are at an altitude of 2 kilometers above sea level, and there is less oxygen here. It is advisable to get used to this altitude first, before straining your body. Secondly, the mountains are deceitful. Here you see the summit and it seems to be within easy reach. You begin the climb and have been walking for half an hour, and the summit is still in the same place, and it can continue like this for an hour. Now you have conquered the summit and there is another one just like it, but a little higher. And after that one, another one, and another one, and another. The more advanced people come here using 4x4s, so as not to suffer, but that's not us. We set out to overcome the 200-meter climb on foot in the middle of the day. At first, everything was great. The first stop was this small church next to the memorial and cemetery. And I would recommend many to stop right there. Take a photo, sit on a bench watching the sunset and go home. The view from here is no worse than from the very top. This is how small the Church of Saint Sarkis seems if you walk another 20 minutes. But if you like to challenge yourself, then you should go there. And this place I call the Armenian Seychelles because of these large round stones. And this is how tiny the church becomes when you just approach the foot of the mountain. And only when you reach this turn do you understand how much more you actually need to go. Already from here the view is stunning. You can see the whole of Tsaghkunk and the snow-capped mountains on the horizon. The angle of ascent here increases. It's getting difficult to walk, and you begin sweating and gasp for air. A little more and we are on the flatter section of the road. At this point, the curve of the mountain is very reminiscent of the Tranquility wallpaper from Windows XP. Birds are soaring in the sky, and we decide to cut and go straight up the mountain. That was a mistake. It seemed like we would have to make a big detour along the way, while a direct way here is really short, but it wasn't so. Walking steeply uphill is very difficult. You quickly lose your breath and lose your pace, and you have to take a lot of breaks. As a result, you lose as much time as it would have taken to walk at a moderate pace around. But now, barely breathing, I run to the top, and behind it, another peak. And snow, and a terrible piercing wind. My guys are just approaching, and I'm already running around the meadow and picturing all the flowers I can find. The weather is starting to get really bad. Cold snow or rain clouds are starting to creep up on us. The wind is terrible. We're not dressed for the weather, so we make a quick break, enjoy the views and start to descend. From here, you can see a piece of Lake Sevanavank, where we've been before. It's a pity, of course. The previous times we came here better prepared, with food and water and a couple of four-leg guards. And we never tried to climb the mountain all the way to the end immediately after arrival, but did it gradually, training for several days. Leg muscles were already giving out on the descent, and the legs were starting to shake badly. But the road was doable. Along the way we met grazing horses and such terrible clumps of caterpillars in the grass. Almost without stopping, we went down and went to dinner. The dinner was amazing, especially if you compare the Spartan conditions we lived in last time. This time we simply bathed in luxury. A glass of 7-year-old Ararat Ani cognac as an aperitif, and my face is already breaking to a smile. And off we go. Salads from the freshest greens and vegetables, real, alive ones, and not with the smell of plastic as we are used to in a big city. Rich soups, beef baked in a pot, and Euro's signature dish, stewed veal in Geghard style. Our best compliment to the chef was completely empty plates. We wanted to try the entire menu and then ask for more, because this is a unique opportunity and you can't miss it. Having barely finished this pot of meat, I, try not to spill it, went to bed. Once again, the day was very busy and the sleep came in an instant. Day 5, the last one. There was only time to have breakfast and walk around the village. That's what we did. Tsaghkunk chef house is on one side of the village and we went to the opposite side. There's no one on the street except for a cat, a couple of horses and cows. Exactly on the middle of the village there's one of two shops. During our previous visit, it was our main supplier of cookies and cola. It must be admitted that in the villages, level of Russian language is much lower than in the capital, so there may be difficulties in communication. There are all the basic products here, but not in the form we are used to. The biggest problem for me was finding a chicken breast in the form of filet. You won't find it in Sevan, and certainly not here. Only a whole chicken and go cut it up yourself defrosted, this is simply a disaster. I was able to find chilled chicken breast only in Yerevan. In the villages, the food is much harsher and requires a significant effort to process. I am explaining this for those who want to cook for themselves during their trip. You shouldn't pass by this place either, Tsaghkunk restaurant and Gulkhatun. I haven't been inside, but judging by how this place looks, the standard here is no worse than in a chic restaurant in Yerevan. Once it was a Soviet canteen for workers, and now it is an elite restaurant. Gulkhatun is a traditional Armenian building with an earthen roof with a hole in the middle.
Lavash is made right here in the traditional way. And the most striking difference from my previous visit here is the Tesla charging station. Yes, imagine it, in the middle of a remote village, guests can charge their brand new electric car while enjoying traditional home cooking served no worse than in Michelin restaurants. And here is the second store. It's newer, opened about 2 years ago, and was already open when we were here for the first time. The commodities range is about the same as in the first one. Here we are on the very outskirts. On the way we come across Haghartsin again, a small mountain stream and a sign indicating the village limits. We go back because breakfast is already waiting for us there. Here is a breakfast 2 years ago, and here it is now. Nothing has changed. Fragrant, very salty homemade cheese, butter, sour cream, fruits and of course traditional gata pie. A little later, scrambled eggs with tomatoes and herbs appear on the table. We say goodbye to the administrator Arthur. We jump into the car and start off to the airport. On the way, we share our impressions of what we have seen over these 5 intensive days. This time, parting with Tsaghkunk was much easier and calmer for me. Last time I've been in tears for 2 days and didn't want to leave. This place touched me so much with its authenticity, warmth and simplicity. This time it was sad that we were not met by a dog named Riji. Last time he followed us around to the mountains for a whole month, protected us from local dogs, but by the end of the trip he began to eat little, lay down more and was very sad. On this visit, the dog was no longer in the village. When we asked where he is, we were tactfully told that he had left. We board the plane. By the way, there are no security control points at the entrance to Zvartnots Airport. You just arrive and go to check-in counter. We buy Armenian cognac at duty-free shop and board the plane. Take off. After gaining altitude, you can take another look at Yerevan. After 2022, the economy of Armenia received a powerful boost, including input from the Russians who moved here, and intensive construction began. I compared the last visit and this one, and this time the number of construction sites can be equated to the level of Moscow. There is also a downside to this. The rent in Yerevan has also reached Moscow levels. Locals complain to us that it is almost impossible now to go to Yerevan to earn money, since the rent is almost equal to the monthly salary of a young specialist. Of the undoubted advantages, I can note the introduction of a ban on smoking in public places. Last time everyone smoked everywhere and a lot. I can't stand tobacco smoke and it was hard for me sometimes. This time everything was great. I completely forgot to say about mobile internet. I bought an eSIM using cryptocurrency with an internet package without calls. This was enough for me for the entire trip. I've been buying this eSIM for about 6 hours though. You can't pay using Russian banking cards, so it turned out to be very difficult to transfer to a crypto wallet. We are no longer welcome on crypto exchange hubs, and P2P exchange hubs are overloaded. 80% of my attempts ended up in a failure due to fail to find the recipient's card number. It would probably have been easier to buy a regular SIM card at the airport. But the adventures did not end there. After landing, we lost our friend Oля at passport control. She traveled using local Russian passport and was taken into a booth for a conversation. She left Russia without any problems, but when she returned, questions appeared. The reason is that she did not look like the photo in her passport. Probably 5 days of delicious Armenian food and fresh air have radically changed her appearance. After a long conversation, she was finally let through. What else did I not show you? The incredibly beautiful, authentic temple complexes Garni and Geghard. Last time I was here in the fall, but since this is the very south of Armenia, south of Yerevan, it was still summer here, you could walk around in a t-shirt. It was that warm. The video from this trip was terribly corrupted, so I only show you a small part of it. Apologize for the quality. Very briefly, Garni is an antique temple and palace complex built in the 1st century AD, which is located 28 kilometers from Yerevan. The place is incredibly beautiful. The kings love to establish their summer residences here because of the good climate and almost complete inaccessibility of this place. The temple was destroyed by an earthquake, and it took a long time to restore it. The historical and cultural complex Garni was awarded the UNESCO Greece Prize in 2011. This complex is completely different in appearance, in my opinion. There is more Greek than Armenian here. There are even Roman baths here. We also went on a tour inside them. The floor mosaic from the 3rd, 4th centuries is perhaps the most impressive part of the bath, the only intact mosaic in Armenia. The main mosaic depicts a water scene with the sea goddess Tethys and other mythological figures and fish on a light green background. The inscriptions of the mosaic are Greek, but the facial features are Oriental. One of the remaining inscriptions on the floor mosaic is written in Koine Greek and reads, "We do not receive debt from the sea or the ocean," which can also be translated as working without payment. Summarizing, the place is very ancient, very interesting. It alone is worthy of a separate video. Geghard is a monastery founded in the 4th century on the site of a sacred spring originating in a cave. Its old name is Yerevan Cave Monastery, and it's located about 40 kilometers southeast of Yerevan. It is listed by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. The cliffs surrounding the monastery are part of the Geghard River Gorge, which is also listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. The full name is Sevanavank, literally Spear Monastery. The name of the monastery complex comes from the Spear of Longinus, which pierced the body of Jesus Christ on the cross. Some of the temples in the monastery complex are completely carved out of the rocks, while the others are complex structures consisting of both wall chambers and rooms carved deep into the cliff. This is a very interesting place from a historical, architectural and spiritual point of view. I remember this rock garden the most. By the way, there is a similar pyramid of rocks, but next to Tsaghkunk. Coincidence? I don't think so. And the Chamber of Thousand Echoes. I waited until I was alone there and tested it. Gives you goosebumps, I swear. I hope that on my next visit I will shoot some good material about these places too. Hey, why won't you write in the comments maybe it's worth making a video like the 10 best historical places to visit in Armenia? Or maybe you want to see something else? Write in the comments. Why do people travel? Why do they want to leave their homes where everything is familiar for the sake of strange, unknown and sometimes even dangerous places? To change the view, to relax, or maybe to see how other people live, to make new friends. Everyone has their own reason. Mine is persistent and tireless search for beauty. How easy it would be to make a video about Maldives, where heavenly beauty is all around you. But I decided to make a video about Armenia, where everything is completely different. But different doesn't mean worse. It's just the beauty here often does not lie on the surface. You need to be able to see it, to feel it. From the luxury of Yerevan, I went out to hinterland not for an outer beauty, but for that very warmth, cordiality, peace, and simplicity. And I found them there in aplenty. During my stay, I did not encounter any aggression or hostility. There were no reprimands due to geopolitical situation either. On the contrary, there were understanding and support. An amazing thing happened in the village. As usual, we walked from the shop and a very old grandfather called upon us. From afar, he asked, "Russi?" We answered, "Yes, Russians." Skipping the essence of the conversation, I will only say that after it, we all hugged and left with tears welling up in our eyes. He was so sincere, heartfelt, and so subtly and correctly described the situation in just a few words that I couldn't help it, and tears just rolled down. Probably this is how it happens when someone in a sincere impulse touches your soul with theirs. I've been to many countries, but I have not yet met so much warmth anywhere. Only here I was surprised to discover that despite everything I have experienced, I have not become callous and can still feel. Armenia will always remain in my heart as a land of simple, kind and sincere people. A land in which a part of my soul remains eternally. A place in which your heart stays forever.